I'm a big fan of whenever a series doesn't even have to be manga, but I really like whenever in a story there is a plot point that happens that you don't understand of how big of an event this scene is until way later in the story. Like when the Element Four are first introduced, they come off as bad guy group. They're enemies. I got grass in my beard from doing chores. But it's clearly it's like, okay, bad guy group. You got Juvia, she's their token girl, and I think it's just hard to guess that she was going to become a main staple member of the guild, and obviously the shipped character right with Gray. That it ends up being better when you go back and look at the chapter, and not only that is it's not like Elfman versus Soul. Like I talked about that one first, and that one is more of a character specific match because Soul is really only winning because Elfman can't do his full body takeover, and with Elfman, because he can't do his full body takeover, he's not able to access his full power, and it's really just that gap of a problem between, oh well, this guy has this advantage and he's taking advantage, or in exploiting this character who, if he had this full capability, he would win. But it's more of a, can he break through this emotional shackle kind of situation. It's way more set for Elfman's character, and that's why Soul doesn't come off really too much of his own guy. I mean, he doesn't really have any backstory or anything really for his character, and we don't really ever see him again. Whereas with Juvia, obviously, upon introduction, we immediately start getting bits from her character that make her more like human. And I've mentioned this before, Mishimo, like, you can generally tell when he's gonna have a character just be like a, I'm just an enemy, when they show what their personality and trait is, and there isn't a kind of funny aspect or anything that shows that, at the end of the day, even when they're not doing enemy things, whether they're an antagonist or an outright villain, they still have stuff going on that makes them be like, oh yeah, it's still a dude trying to do whatever, trying to hang out, trying to talk to people in his squad, or whatever it could be. And we know that Phantom Lord did have some form of camaraderie between them, not like a ton, but we know that Gajil and Juvia, for example, did go on missions together for take down dark guilds, and there was clearly a level of kinship between the two of them, that once she went and to join Fairy Tail, that she put in word towards where Gajia was and what was going on to Makarov. So it's like, it really says a lot about her character in the long run. But here, I actually think that this is one of, like, I don't want to give it a specific number, but I think it's one of Gray's better fights, because it, like I mentioned, with Soul and Elfman, it is way more of a character specific match. With Natsu and Totomaro, it was more of Natsu just trying to get around an annoying ability. Urza versus Arya, you had Urza just showing that Arya was clearly a capable person, but he's trying to claim things for himself that were gotten through deceit and treachery. Well, maybe not deceit, but stealth and treachery and sneaking attacks that really you can't count his victory on Makarov as like an actual win. But with Juvia and Gray, it's really a back and forth between the two of them. Like, there isn't a point where Gray feels like he's dominating the match. There isn't a point where Juvia feels like she's dominating the match. They have general back and forth where sometimes one of the characters had a level of sway going on with the other one. Like, it starts out, they're just going back and forth. Juvia's boiling water is clearly a little bit of a problem for Gray at the start, but it is something that Gray is like impossible that he can't deal with or can't work around. And I think when you have something like that, it shows again that there is a, like, the basis of, like, when it comes to their characters, it's like really you have these two characters with very high level of capability and talent and potential. But Juvia, at least at this point, I think Juvia has a larger untapped pool of capability, whereas Gray is just better at utilizing his skills and realizing what he's actually capable of. Because with Juvia, we know that she was passively affecting the weather, and that's something that she hasn't really ever been able just to be like, oh yeah, let me just grab it and do it real fast. It seems to just always be like, when it comes to her emotions, she's able to do it passively or do it reactionary. It's just like a full intention. But there's like a specific points in this match, like you get stuff like when Juvia grabs Gray in a water lock. Oh my god, there's some vacuuming going on. Okay, vacuuming seems to be done. But you have Juvia like trap Gray in a water lock, and she mentions that he's hurt, and before she goes to just let him out, Gray freezes it and breaks through. And this, I think this is important because later in their match, when Gray freezes her, and you have that part where you just like have a funny moment when he freezes her and she's like completely iced up and he's like feeling her up by accident. And Gray ends up undoing the ice on her. I actually think this was really important because it showed that Gray, when apprehended, he's able to break out, and then Juvia maybe could, she didn't want to, but Gray did it willingly, and that just, again, it showed between the two of them that neither of them had a really bad heart. And we know with Gray, obviously, but it shows with Juvia that Juvia was never evil and that Juvia was never a malefic person. It's just like she was just, she's just in a guild where this is the standard. Like, being a thug is the standard at how they go about their business. But as it were, like, again, like Gray is able to even freeze her boiling water when she gets jealous enough of Lucy, and she's able to pull this, again, steaming boiling water out. And again, I assume it's like, it's fiction. It's not like it gets to a point where it's like, oh, it's just gonna evaporate and she's gonna have steam just based off that. Maybe I don't think so. Just Gray already has, like, at this point, like, resistance to fire that would obviously be way higher than the average melting or the average steam points, or just like boiling water. So fictional powers involved. It's easy to figure out. But still, it's still impressive for Juvia to want to be able to just to go through Gray's ice. But it's still impressive that even though Gray's ice is unable to fully contend and direct with them, if he's able to focus on the freezing aspect, he's able to overcome it and still freeze the boiling water. And again, I think this was really cool because it showed a very strong standard for like where these characters are at. Because again, with Elfman versus Soul, it's very clear once Elfman got his full power back, he ran over Soul. Same thing with Arya and Urza. Urza didn't even need her full power back when it came to that fight. But when you look at Gray versus Juvia, we know that Juvia, for one, we know from like obviously going to the S-Class trial on Sirius Island, as well as her fight with Meredy, Juvia has a lot of, just a lot of capability that she hasn't fully realized. And when you look at a fight like this, like, we know where Gray was, we know still where Juvia was, just based off of like, opening up to Element 4 and being around S-Class level in general. You can say, okay, well, just based on this one, Juvia holds her position because she's actually able to go back and forth with one of Fairy Tail's more capable members. But it also shows Gray's capabilities, because if Juvia is at this position and, Gray's not just running over her, he's able to match attacks, counter attacks, figure out attacks, ways around her moves, also while taking hits and taking damage. So it really builds their, a concrete status of where these two are at, as well as like it really shows consistency at where these other characters that are around and adjacent to them. So on top of that, I think it's really cool whenever fights have very specific memorable moments. And you have stuff like, obviously, like Juvia at this point only really knew the rain-filled sky, never knew the blue clear sky. And when you're seeing her backstory and stuff, and it's just like a sad one. It's not crazy in terms of like the worst things ever for her, but you can see how she got to this point where it's just loneliness, and eventually she found somewhere that she fit in. And unfortunately, the environment of Phantom Lord was very hostile and very aggressive, and Julia just went with what it was. But when Gray goes and just like mass freezes her and even freezes the rain around them, it's a very just cool moment of being able just to like ice all the rain. But going for that last final attack, where after that point, I also really like how the anime added in where Juvia was falling and Gray goes to save her. Really, really nice stuff whenever they just give little character traits like that and just add on. But it really expanded upon what her character presented in this series and what her character was going to be doing, because it's like, okay, by the end of this you could just be like, oh, she's just going to be a side character that, at best you'd probably assume that she's going to be a side character that maybe comes around once or twice for Gray, and it seems like that to a degree at the start. But obviously now you see what large scale of importance she's been in the series and on like just different events that Juvia's participated in. So it's really nice to see when you have a fight like this where it's like an opposition of what you'd expect. You'd expect it to be way more of a character match, like with, say like with Elfman and Soul, but it in itself is a very combat scenario. There's funny stuff with Juvia's personality and interactions with Gray, but at the end of the day, like, a lot of it's just straight up like he's just trying to attack her, Gray isn't letting up just because she's a girl, and Juvia is just like, she, even though she's clearly got affections for Gray at this point, she's mad about what everything's going on. She's trying to fight for her guild, and it takes her Gray just to have that kind of really cool pressure limit break moment where he ices all the rain and takes her out, for her to get to a point where she's able to really get level-headed enough to know what's going on. But I'd love to hear what you guys have in the comments to say about this, because it's a very straightforward fight. Juvia didn't have any like crazy abilities like she pulled out where it's like, oh, I control the water in your body and I can, she just becomes a bloodbender or something. No, she's just like, she's got her own stuff, water attacks, and she's got her elemental body and the whole boiling water ability. Like, it's stuff that is, it's still dangerous, but it's not like some crazy fight that like Gray has to go over the top in order to figure out. No, they had a pretty straightforward back and forward fight, and they had a conclusion to it where clearly Gray was the victor, and it set up Juvia to be a long-standing member of the series and a key. And that's the thing you got to think about too, is like how important of a character Juvia is to Gray at this point. And it all started from this match where where Gray wasn't discriminating the fact that she was a girl. He was just going straight at, trying to fight her, and now she's like the most important character to him specifically. So, like I said, comment below, tell me your thoughts about this matchup, and tell me your thoughts about this this fight. We're going to talk about Arya versus Urza. It'll be a little bit shorter of a match, but I want to talk about more of just like the point of it and where it stands for Arya and where it stands for Urza. We'll talk on the next one though.